We welcome to the program now Congressman Michael Guest. He represents Mississippi's 3rd District in the United States House of Representatives. Good afternoon there, Congressman. Thanks for calling in.
Gerard, great to talk to you again today.
Yes, sir. So we've been talking quite a bit this morning about the situation at the border, which is totally out of control. I think recently described by ICE spokespeople as catastrophic. And you guys it looks like you're poised to take up articles of impeachment filed against the Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. He serves as the Secretary of Homeland Security. I think there are 2 articles, is that right, Congressman, that passed through the committee on party lines. And so tell us what happened next.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Gerard. So yesterday morning, 10 a.m., Committee on Homeland Security, committee on which I serve as Vice Chairman, and committee in which Mike Ezell and Benny Thompson also serve, took up articles of impeachment against Secretary Mayorkas. We had roughly a 15-hour hearing, began at 10 a.m., ended sometime after 1 o'clock a.m.
Wow.
On Wednesday morning. Much of that hearing dealt with amendments offered by members from the Democratic Party that would have basically gutted the articles of impeachment. But the articles really were based on 2 things. First is that Secretary Mayorkas has failed to uphold the law, particularly citing more than half a dozen sections within the Immigration and Nationalization Act that require the Secretary to both detain and remove immigrants. The second ground was breach of public trust. And the breach of public trust, much of that revolved around the fact that Secretary Mayorkas has repeatedly lied to Congress under oath when he's told us that the border is secure and that the Department of Homeland Security has operational control of the border. So those articles of impeachment passed out of the House on the early morning hours today. We believe that the Speaker will bring those articles to a floor vote sometime next week, which will require a majority of the House, 50% plus 1, to return the articles of impeachment, and then those articles would be sent to the Senate.
Okay. And then what would happen in the Senate? The threshold's higher there, is it not, Congressman, to actually remove the Secretary?
That's right. For a conviction on the articles of impeachment and removal from office would require a 2/3 vote from all members of the United States Senate who are present and voting. Okay. So right now there's a 51-49 the Democrats majority. So for the impeachment to be successful and Mayorkas to be removed, there would have to be a large number of Democrats voting to support those articles of impeachment, which at this time, Gerard, seems highly unlikely. Yeah. But Republicans, particularly House Republicans, felt that this was the last tool that we had available to us to hold Secretary Mayorkas accountable and to try to restore some sort of law and order on the southwest border.
He continues to be defiant, does he not, Congressman, in that he just advises Congress that, hey, the border's secure.
He does. He chooses which laws to enforce and which laws not to enforce, even though the sections are clear. They use the word shall, not the word may. He has created masses or created systems to release large number of immigrants into the homeland. If you look just at and look at nationwide encounters. Nationwide encounters, Gerard, last month in December of 2023, there were over 371,000 encounters in 1 month alone. And so under Secretary Mayorkas, you continue to see the numbers of encounters grow generally month after month and particularly year after year. You see the flood of illegal drugs, fentanyl, coming into the country. We know that the leading cause of death for individuals 18 to 45 is now drug overdose, much of that related to fentanyl. And then we see the financial crisis that this has caused many cities and states, not only border cities and border states, but cities such as New York and Chicago, some of these sanctuary cities, they're paying a steep financial price for Secretary Mayorkas's refusal to enforce the law.
Wow. And then I'm sure you've been keeping up with this. The president, when questioned by reporters about the border, he says he doesn't have any authority to secure it. But we've since learned, of course, did a little research on that. He, in fact, does. He does have that authority. And the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, has shared those authorities with him on Twitter.
You know, you're exactly right. He has the same authorities that President Trump had and the authorities President Trump used. We see this president chose to, day one, dismantle the Remain in Mexico policy, which was probably the most successful policy we had in controlling the border search.
Yeah.
He stopped wall construction. He implemented a catch and release program.
Yep.
The thing that I find interesting is last week the president, when questioned by a reporter, and when asked, does he believe that the U.S.-Mexico border is secure, his answer was, no, it's not. I haven't believed that for the last 10 years, and I've said that. And then he ended with this phrase. He said, give me the money.
Yeah.
This seems to me to be, as we're looking at least his motivation for securing the border, I think is twofold. His motivation is he wants more money for the Department of Homeland Security, and he's not wanting to give in policy changes. And so the additional funds would just allow him and the administration to process immigrants through quicker, probably continuing the cycle that we've seen. But we also know that this is becoming a political liability for the president. It is an election year. He is getting beat up in polling. Some recent polling I saw today in battleground states, when asked who you trust more on immigration, Donald Trump or Joe Biden, President Trump had a 22-point advantage. And I think this president is seeing that. He's worried about his polling numbers. He's worried about his reelection. And that's the only reason he's paying any lip service to the border. Yeah.
It seems like that. Well, because he's got folks in his party and in his base that are now starting to speak up about the problems. And, of course, the Democrat-run cities are being overrun as well with immigrants that are traveling to those cities. Of course, they announced themselves as sanctuary cities. I mean, what do you expect? And now they're not saying, hey, close the border down. We talked about this earlier on the program. The Denver mayor, he's going to the federal government saying we need more money. He's not saying close the border down.
Yeah, they had the same message that President Biden said when he said, give me the money. These sanctuary cities, whether they be Denver, New York, Chicago, they want the federal government to pay for these immigrants to be housed, these immigrants to be fed, to receive medical treatment. They want the education of these immigrants to be paid by the federal government.
Yeah.
And you're exactly right. But you are starting to see, as you mentioned a second ago, that there are some Democrats who are now willing to speak out against the president.
Yep.
Mayor Adams in New York City talks about how immigration is destroying New York. Vicente Gonzalez, who is a representative who represents a portion of the southern border, is continuing to talk about the crisis in his communities. And so it is refreshing to see that there are at least a handful of Democrats who are now seeing this for what it really is, and they're identifying the impact that it's having in their communities.
Man, it's just unbelievable. I mean, it truly is. I mean, and the thing about this issue, Congressman, this isn't like some deep embedded text in a bill somewhere that's going to ultimately get passed to cause problems. This is something you see with your own eyes. I mean, so it's so visual. It has such a strong visual impact when you see the images, when you see the reporters on the border, or even yourself and other members of Congress down there and in the background. And I believe that's the reason Joe Biden won't go, because he knows reporters are going to follow him, and they're going to capture exactly what we all see every day, just as a matter of consuming news, that it's just porous is what's going to happen.
You're exactly right. You turn on the news, particularly Fox News, which does a great job of covering the border, and you see day after day, week after week, month after month, just the surge of immigrants coming across the border. But what we've also had the opportunity to do is hear testimony from people whose lives have been affected by what we've seen happen.
Yeah.
People whose loved ones have been killed by immigrants who are in the country illegally, or their children have died of drug overdoses.
We got a break right here. Have you got to go, or can you hang for another segment?
I'm happy to hang on for another segment.
Great. We'll get into some other stuff. Congressman Michael Guest is our guest on Midday. Stay with us. We're visiting with Congressman Michael Guest in Washington. He's called in, joined us today. So, Congressman, this immigration deal in the Senate that I believe has been spearheaded by Senator James Lankford of Oklahoma, I got to tell you, it's pretty confusing. It's hard to follow exactly, and you know, it's been criticized a lot, certainly by some of your colleagues in the House that believe it's a bad deal. And I've seen the senator come out and say, and others as well, that it's just misinformation, that we're not really appreciating what this bill really does. Have you taken a look at this and investigated it yourself?
You know, the bill text has still not been released, Gerard.
Okay.
You're exactly right. There are a handful of senators, roughly 4 to 6 senators, who are writing the bill. The bill is being written in secret. They have not sought the input of the House.
Okay.
There's no communication either with Speaker Johnson's office, with Homeland Security, Chairman Mark Green. And so we keep hearing day after day that they're close and that they expect to release bill text. But we really don't know what's in it. Some of the things that have leaked out have been reported on Fox News and other news sites. Whether those are accurate or not kind of remains to be seen. And so I'm taking the approach is I want to see the final product. I want to see what they put together. I want to see if they put together legislation that will have a dramatic effect, and if there are true policy changes. If there's things such as a trigger that says that these policy changes can only take effect if there are 5,000 immigrants a day that come across the border, which is something, again, that has been reported, and we're not for sure if it's in the bill. That would be something that would cause me to look very skeptical on the bill. And so we're waiting. We're seeing. Hope that we'll get bill text, but we've been hearing that now for 3 weeks, that bill text is coming any day now, and we've yet to see that bill text out of the Senate. Okay.
Well, what I've heard the Senator Lankford say is that, no, folks got this wrong. This is not a situation where allowing immigrants to cross over and then we shut the border down, that we're trying to set this 5,000 a day threshold up, but rather the goal is 0. But just in reading, various news reports that break down what is apparently going to be incorporated into legislation, that doesn't seem to be the case. It does seem to be that there are some triggers and so forth. It's confusing at a minimum, but I certainly understand how it's kind of hard to comment and analyze and form an opinion until you've seen the text.
That's exactly right. And I know that the Speaker has come out in opposition to the bill. And again, I believe that is the information that he is reading in the media. But it'll be interesting to see when that bill text is released exactly what language they have included there. And so I'm happy to come back on and talk about it in more detail once we know what's in it.
All right. Sounds good. Right now, I guess the question we all have, we talked about it earlier, why can't we just shut the thing down? I mean, it's the question on everybody's mind, and I know that's easier said than done. But those of us who are concerned about just the surge, which has been off the charts since Joe Biden's been in office, we just want to shut the thing down.
Extremely frustrating for everyone, particularly for members of Congress. We were elected to come and we were elected to pass policy and make sure and serve as a checks and balance on this administration. But what we see is we've got a rogue cabinet secretary, and Secretary Mayorkas. He refuses to obey the law. We see that this administration is repeatedly taken into court. They're told to do things such as to reinstitute the Remain in Mexico policy. They refuse to do so. And that's why you see that Republicans have taken the action in the House to try to impeach a cabinet secretary. Only the second time in history There's only been one other cabinet secretary which articles of impeachment were brought against. And so we are trying to use everything that we can to remove Secretary Mayorkas and to force the administration to enforce the law. But the best thing that we can do is going to be at the ballot box in November. Mm-hmm. We've got to make sure that President Joe Biden is not reelected and that President Trump is elected and that he is able to then on day one reinstate the policies that he had in place that were very successful. And I would say that under President Trump, we had probably one of the most secure borders in the last several decades.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, again, your eyes tell you that. They guide your decision there and your opinion there. You see what's happening now, and every day it's just thousands are coming across, and then you think about what you saw when President Trump was in office, and it just wasn't that way. So your eyes don't deceive, and that's kind of where we are right now. Let's pivot a bit to money, funding. Once again, we're operating the government under a continuing resolution, something that honestly was responsible for the removal of former Speaker Kevin McCarthy. Here we go again, Congressman. It looks like these extend into late February, early March. Is there any work being done right now consistent with regular order to pass the 12 spending bills? I guess we have, 7 or 8 remaining that haven't been passed, to put us back to a normal way of funding government?
You know, what we have now is we have an agreement on the top line figure between Speaker Johnson and Schumer in the Senate. And we've also just late last week, we've reached spending levels, top line spending levels on the individual spending bills. There's 12 individual bills. Those top line spending number on each bills are called the 302 allocations. And so we finally have those figures where we can begin in conference where Republicans and Democrats, House and Senate, are writing these bills together. And so we are going to be able to begin the process of marrying up the House and Senate versions on the different appropriations. You know, but one of the things in addition to that top line figure that we're going to be having disagreements about are policy riders. Policy riders are where Republicans would seek to put into a spending bill language that may say that the only flags that can fly over a veterans cemetery or veterans hospitals are military-related flags. So
right.
We know that last fall we had LGBTQ flags that were flying over a veterans cemetery. Several people were angry about that. And so we included language in the House bill that would prohibit those flags or Black Lives Matter or really any political flag from flying over a veterans cemetery because it's just inappropriate. But those are going to be the types of things that we're also going to be arguing about, fighting about, because I think it's important for conservatives that we see conservative wins and conservative policy riders included in these spending bills.
Yeah, absolutely. So the other thing that, before we go, is this bipartisan tax deal that is being debated as well, which would restore some of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Acts, the Trump tax cuts, provisions that affect businesses, not the individual provisions. But in exchange for that, we're modifying the child tax credit, making it more generous. Do you have you looked into that and having a position on that yet?
We're continuing to look at it. You know, at this point, I'm leaning towards supporting the measure.
Okay.
I think any time that we can cut taxes, particularly that you talk about the business taxes for research and development, them being able to quickly write off those expenses, those are something that we routinely hear from our businesses about. And I know that there'll be a lot of Mississippi families who will be affected by the child tax credit, and if that amount is increased, it will benefit the citizens of our state. I ran for Congress to lower taxes, and I'm having the opportunity, or will have the opportunity, to vote on a bill to do that probably later this week. I understand it's not a perfect bill, but again, in divided government, you have to take your wins when you can get them.
Well, restoring those tax deduction and credit provisions, I think, is critical to continue to grow our economy. And as you know, they're scheduled to be phased out even more under the original TCJA. So I think restoring those and making them permanent certainly is a good deal and is a good move there. But as always, we appreciate you joining us today, Congressman Michael Guest, and I'm sure we will be talking to you soon. Stay safe, sir.